Hey, what's up, fans? We are here to talk for a little fantasy football 20 season. We haven't been on here the last couple. I know I've been busy kind of attacking other things to do with life, and you've had some other weddings and stuff like that. So it's good to be back, though.
Yeah, it's definitely good to be back. Happy we touched base this morning and on here now, man. It always seems a little weird when we haven't been on video for a couple weeks. So I'm pumped to be back on here.
Yep, I feel like we're 2 weeks away from baseball now. NBA is really quickly getting back to that restart. So there's a lot to talk about, including the fact that they've had golf up, but Overlay now has their first basketball contest up for July 30th, which is just under 3 weeks away, depending on when you watch this video. We'll probably make a video on this at some point next week, just as kind of talking points, kind of reiterate what the website does, but also just an excuse to get on here and talk a little smack about sports because we are all missing it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are in that same boat.
Let's go, man. Like, I'm not even that hyped about NBA coming back because, like, I want baseball. But, man, I'm pumped to talk about this stuff with you. So I am happy.
Right? We both love baseball. You're one of the few people I've ever met that probably likes baseball even more than I do. I'm pumped for NBA though, but we totally understand the difference, right? Like my Bucks are right there at the top, whereas your Cavaliers aren't even invited.
Yeah, exactly. And more than that, I just miss, like, going through this stuff every day with you. I just really do.
Amen. Let's get it going. So we talked about this when we were doing a few more videos the other week that we're going to start rattling off team by team. We finished up the Ravens. We're a good ways the way through the Cleveland Browns, your team. We've covered Baker Mayfield, Odell, the running back. So we still need to hit up our boy Austin Hooper today, and then we need to touch about Jarvis Landry. I don't think we needed to get into like the real deep players like Njoku. You just don't draft them. Why would you draft Njoku, right?
Yeah, and speaking of Njoku, he's asking for a trade, so that belongs in this video. But we definitely don't need to make a video on him. Agreed.
No, I wouldn't think so either. Don't draft him, and if he plays well and you want to pick him up, go do your thing. So Austin Hooper, one of the big free agent signings coming into Cleveland this year. I like him as a player. I don't feel like I've watched enough of the Falcons to know how good he is, especially when Julio's drawing all the coverage away from him, leaving the middle of the field open. I mean, clearly he's no scrub. He got paid well. This guy can play. I'm more worried with him more than anything. There's so many mouths to feed in Cleveland this year.
There's so many mouths to feed. Agreed. Like, I don't know. It's no indictment to him. I'm just not sure. Like, I agree with you. I don't know how much he moves the needle. He's good, and I expect him to be an upgrade over Njoku. Njoku wasn't bad though. He had stone hands and couldn't catch, but I think he's got potential if he catches on somewhere that they know how to use him. As far as Hooper goes, they did pay him a lot of money. I think he's provides some stability. I know Stefanski loves running, two tight end sets, so they've got their main guy in Hooper. They drafted a tight end who they, think big things of. But for now, it's Hooper's job, and I expect him to be a safety valve for Baker Mayfield. We've talked a bunch about how this is a make it or break it year for Baker Mayfield. I think that how he utilizes Hooper is going to go a long way. I think that's the check down option he needs. And I'm a little worried because it seems like a lot of Hooper's numbers came when the Falcons were down big, came on freak big plays that aren't necessarily replicable. But I do have to trust that the Browns know more than I do, than we do, and that they paid him big money for a reason. I'm hopeful, if not overly excited about it.
Don't forget to subscribe to the station if you're new to it. Thumbs up. All those points that you brought up to me are big concerns with him. Here's my thing with Austin Hooper. I think he could be massively out fantasy football this year by lesser tight ends. And he's just not necessarily as needed. And I'm with your assessment of the Atlanta Falcons last year that they're a bad football team. So they were down in a lot of games. What happens when you're down? All of a sudden they drop back into cover two. The majority of the attention, once again, goes to Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones specifically. And Austin Hooper is left in position to exploit the middle of the field in a situation where, the Falcons are down 28-13, or whatever it might be. And if you want to just nickel and dime the clock, Hooper can go ahead and get 4 catches for 45 yards in the fourth quarter. So I'm curious to see how it plays out, but it's not a guy that I'm going to be overly aggressive on because I just really, really don't see the upside here. You take a look at like Gesicki down to Miami or something like that. I could see him having monster numbers this year because he's more of a necessity, whereas I just can't picture Austin Hooper being the main guy in this offense, which with Kevin Stefanski, year one, is going to be a run-first offense. When you have a Nick Chubb and a Kareem Hunt, it makes sense to be a run-first offense. You have Odell and Jarvis Landry at the wideout positions. I just don't know how much he's needed.
I agree with that. The one way he could provide upside and big time value is like all guys, touchdowns. I could see him having a big effect on the red zone. I think we do see Hooper kind of similarly though. I know he's getting paid like the highest tight end in football. That's just a casualty of the market and that he was a free agent this year. I definitely view him more in like the Kyle Rudolph, Tyler Eifert mold than like Travis Kelce, George Kittle.
Yeah, I put Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and George Kittle in to be a class of their own. And then below that, I think of more of like a Darren Waller might have upside because I can completely picture the Oakland Raiders needing to throw the ball. And outside of Josh Jacobs, they lack weapons, right? So I could see him having a lot more potential, even though if Waller and Hooper were next to each other, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think Waller's the better tight end. I just think his opportunity and the situation he's in is significantly better for upside and for safety.
I agree. I mean, he's a big part of that offense, and he's like borderline a wide receiver. But after that, like, I don't think Hooper is definitely not a guy I'm targeting. But I'm also not like horribly mad if I end up with him. If a lot of people feel the same way we do, and he just goes in that mix of tight ends, he's going to get looks and he's going to catch some touchdowns. I don't think he's going to be the staple of anyone's fantasy roster, but I think he's worth rostering in especially like 12-team and above leagues.
For sure. He's worth rostering, and we can move on to the next one, which talks about his ADP. Two websites, I looked them up on Fantasy Pros, currently around 108. So if you're playing in a 10-team league, we're talking somewhere in the 11th round. Not a lot of draft equity going into that. ESPN has them all the way down into the 14th round. So this is not one of those guys that people are overpaying for early in the season, which makes it fine. If this is where you end up from a tight end perspective, that you're not reaching for this dude. But I do think there are other guys and other tight ends that we'll get into as the fantasy football videos mount up that have more upside than him because they're not playing offenses filled with Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, and Kareem Hunt.
There's definitely tight ends around there that I like more, but he belongs there. I'm not going to be surprised if he's, top 5 in tight ends in touchdowns this year and top 10 in yards. You know what I mean? He's good. He's definitely not a guy that either of us are targeting, but that has much to do with the situation that it does himself. And that's a good thing. That's one of those good problems for Browns fans.
Right. Yeah. He's playing out of a dome as well. Fast track, another game in New Orleans, got a game against Carolina. Now he's moving to the AFC North, which has typically been a more defensive oriented type of a division. You got 2 games against the Ravens. I mean, they're not going to give up a ton of yards, you wouldn't think. Steelers, I'm sure, will come out and play hard. So it's a downgrade in divisional games as well.
For sure. I mean, no dome. It's a downgrade in probably quarterbacks right now too. I mean, going from Matt Ryan,
sure.
Clearly they had a really good rapport with. Hooper and Matt Ryan worked very well together. It's to be seen whether him and Baker have that connection.
Right, and I think the struggle here is, again, Stefanski is a run-first type of coach. He wants to run the football. And if things work out this year like you want them to, where Cleveland is competitive and they're good, there's going to be a lot of games where Baker Mayfield's going to throw the ball 20 to 25 times, which means that, let's just say he, 65% completion rate or whatever. There's going to be a lot of games where he has like 13 to 16 completions. Unless they all go to Hooper, there's just not a lot of stats there. I could see games where if Cleveland plays well, Nick Chubb has 19 carries and Kareem Hunt has 11.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. So the upside is lacking here. I think he's solid. The later he falls, obviously, the better he gets. But that's with anyone. The one other tight end I would put in that top tier is Mark Andrews.
Give me one more year, but I'm not going to argue your point. I like the kid. I was on him, on almost all my leagues last year. Part of that because you were really big into him, and I took the bait on that one, and it worked out really well. Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know if Mark Andrews is as good as like George Kittle, though.
I agree with that. But
fantasy.
Yeah, man. Like, I think that Kelce and Kittle are the top 2 in fantasy for sure, but I might have Andrews. Andrews and Ertz are like real close for me, especially because I think Goddard is real good. And Andrews just fits Lamar Jackson so well.
Yeah, you got to like the spot for him. And you expect, I'm a bigger Lamar fan than you are, at least at this point, but the offense is going to move the needle, right? Lamar Jackson is going to create yards and points, and without a ton of weapons at the wide receiver, position. You know, we talked about Hollywood Brown recently. He's the de facto touchdown guy.
I could definitely see him. Like, I feel like we've gone over this earlier in one of our earlier videos. I would not be shocked if he's like the leading fantasy tight end this year.
No, I wouldn't be shocked by it either. Again, I think George Kittle in real life is significantly better, but San Francisco really, really wants to run the ball. And they also have pretty good wide receivers.
I also think Kittle is better, but he's better than basically everyone else. I think Andrew's good, and he's in a great spot, but I guess that's to be seen. I don't – for me personally, and just speaking on Hooper, you know, guys that I see ESPN has around him are guys I like more than him. You know, you talked about Gesicki. I like Jack Doyle this year with Rivers, you know, no Eric Ebron.
Sure.
You got guys like Rob Gronkowski.
I think Doyle's upside is significantly higher than Hooper, even though if I was drafting on a playground tomorrow and I needed a tight end in real life, I would definitely take Hooper over Doyle.
Agreed, for sure. Good way to put it.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference. And sometimes that's hard. Like me and you and most of you guys listening, we clearly understand the difference between, you know, fantasy year-long DFS and real life. But to maybe some of your more novice players, that's a difficult thing to adjust to at first, is that talent, while it matters, may not even be as important as opportunity. And I could definitely see, like you brought up Doyle, like Phillip Rivers loves the tight end position.
No Ebron there.
Yeah.
And like solid. He's not amazing, but he's solid. And I feel like he's a guy quarterbacks can trust.
All right. So not to make this guy sound more boring than he could, I'm formally on board with drafting him in the 11th, 12th, 13th round like this, if that's where you end up from a tight end position. But this isn't the kind of guy that's going to win the league for you. I feel his floor is relatively safe and the talent is good. I just really question his opportunity this year. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Cleveland. It was the same problem I had with Odell Beckham. I still respect the talent, but there's a lot of mouths to feed. This Cleveland offense, if Baker Mayfield plays well this year, could be really good.
Now, on the flip side of that, like if he's playing well and the offense is playing well, they'll be moving the ball. So there will be a lot of mouths to feed, but someone, if not multiple people, will have good years. For me, though, I said I wouldn't be like mad if I ended up with Hooper. It's just not going to happen for me, though, because there's tight ends that I like, you know, that ESPN and other, you know, resources have 10 tight ends below Hooper that I like more. So I just cannot envision a scenario where I take Hooper. I just can't.
I'm with you. I like to double up on the tight end position at the end of drafts. So I could see me maybe taking a Hooper and then another guy that I feel like has more potential, more upside, something like that. But I can't draft Hooper with good conscience and just feel like, yeah, I can pencil that dude in for 10 to 15 points per week from a PPR perspective. I feel there's a lot of weeks where Hooper's going to have like 2 catches, 19 yards. Cleveland wins the game 23-10. You know, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt just killed the clock and ran the ball all day.
And that's why I can't see me drafting him, because I agree with you. And he's still getting drafted like a tight end 1. Like he's not getting drafted that high, but he still is probably getting overdrafted. You know, to quit beating around the bush. He's still being overdrafted for how productive we think he's going to be this year. I see that, you know, ESPN has their rankings split up. I'm looking at like their PPR tight end rankings.
Yep. They have several lists.
Yeah, exactly. The one I'm looking at, who knows? The one today that I'm looking at, it probably changed tomorrow, has Hooper overall tight end number 9. But when you look at it individually, like Carabell, like most of the people have him ranked 7th through 9th, but then Matthew Berry, who I normally really disagree with, has him ranked 15th. And I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't argue with that. I just can't see the upside in this guy this year. No respect or disrespect to his game. He's not in the dome anymore. And Matt Ryan puts up big yards every year, right? Atlanta's defense always stinks, and they're always throwing the ball a ton. I mean, at the end of the season, it's completely possible to think like Matt Ryan would average 12 more passing attempts per game than Baker Mayfield.
So I said earlier, like, you know, Hooper's probably downgrading in quarterbacks. He's definitely downgrading in quarterbacks. And we hope Baker Mayfield has a good year this year. And Matt Ryan hasn't been able to get over the hump. But Matt Ryan's also a former MVP. a guy who puts up big yards every single year. So it's definitely a downgrade on paper for Hooper. And that's not even, touching on the rapport that they had. And I remember seeing something on this like last year that Hooper and Matt Ryan like really worked a ton in the offseason to the point where, Matt Ryan would know exactly where Hooper would be at all times. And I think that stuff, kind of gets forgotten about.
All right, I didn't like Hooper when we started talking. I like him less now that we've talked him out. I like him less and less and less. I'm going to go ahead and make a bold call here. I'm kind of flipping what I think about him even just throughout this video. I think Austin Hooper is going to get drafted and cut by a lot of people this year.
I don't disagree at all because I think that you're 100% right that he's going to definitely have weeks where he has 3 catches for 30 yards. If the Browns are good and, beating the teams that they should beat, they're going to be able to run the ball. And if he's not involved in one of the 2 touchdowns early, then he might not be involved.
Right. And you talked about that chemistry. And that is the one thing that I think we both, I was bigger on Austin Hooper's as like a DFS tight end than you were early last year. And then you started to like him a little bit more as the season progressed. That chemistry cannot be overstated. Like I feel like now that you said that, I kind of remember hearing that. Maybe you and I even talked about that last year, that him and Matt Ryan were working a lot. Matt Ryan puts up yards.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a guy that can move the ball. He's better than that, too. He's good. He's not great, but he's very good. Like, hopefully Baker Mayfield can turn into like Matt Ryan. I mean, hopefully better, but if you gave me like a Matt Ryan type right now, I'll take it for sure.
So here's a question for you. This is kind of off the fantasy football path for just a second, but you and I have gotten into a lot of nuanced conversations about how quarterbacks get too much, credit and too much blame, and how winning is they're given way too much credit for wins and losses as being a stat that applies to them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If Atlanta was better coached and didn't pull off the ultimate choke job and lose that Super Bowl, how much different is the narrative attached to Matt Ryan that this is a Super Bowl champion, MVP, perennial 4,000 plus yards per season? And I remember watching that Super Bowl. You watched the whole thing. I didn't really chalk that loss up to Matt Ryan. I thought it was bad strategy, bad coaching, total choke job on the part of the Atlanta Falcons. Feels like they spent the whole second half with no rhyme or reason to why they were doing at certain times what they were doing. And of course, you have to give some credit and attach it to the New England Patriots and Tom Brady and whatnot. But man, talk about a narrative change on that guy.
So Matt Ryan has a propensity, and I'm even going back to that game, thinking about it, of like taking bad sacks and, not necessarily making the best decision when he's under that type of pressure. But a lot of guys do stuff like that. And I actually like the cut of his jib. I really do. He's a guy that I would want as the quarterback of my team. He's not like an all-time great, but I'm with you, man. With good coaching, that team wasn't like spectacular on defense or anything like that. Matt Ryan was the best player in the league that year. He won the MVP. Yeah, he's probably underrated because of that choke job in the Super Bowl. He did not. It wasn't his fault, I'll say this, but he did not like help. He did not make plays to stop them from choking, which was needed.
100%. Agree with you 100%. I was rewatching that game the other day when I was out. It was on the TV. And like those little things that we forget about, when the Patriots came down to win the game, I completely forgot that Tom Brady threw another what should have been a pick, and the Atlanta linebacker dropped it in the end zone, the one where James White caught the touchdown.
I remember that now that you're speaking of it.
I completely forgot about it. It's those little things. I remember when quarantine first started, I talked to you about how I was watching like old school highlights from like the 90s. And like I completely forgot about the narrative that Karl Malone, one of the reasons the Jazz didn't go farther, despite how many successful seasons they had with Sloan, Stockton, and Malone, is Karl Malone religiously missed key free throws down the stretch of playoff games, like over and over and over again. It's those little things that we forget about. And I think this is where breaking down Tom Brady becomes so interesting because, like, he's a couple of balls away from being 9-0 in Super Bowls, but he's also like a couple things away from being 2-7.
For sure. Years like last year, I'll say, do not help Matt Ryan when the team is like just really bad. But a lot of it has to do with how bad their defense is.
Yeah, their defense has been pretty trash for the majority of his career. And going back to Matt Ryan, because you brought him back up like we should have been, like, if he wins that game and they don't completely flummox the entire second half, Matt Ryan's tied with my boy Aaron Rodgers and his divisional teammate Drew Brees with Super Bowl wins. And at that point, For those of you who give too much credit and too much issues to quarterbacks for a win-loss record, how do you not put him close to the same as Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's I don't consider him on the same level as like Rodgers or Breeze. Obviously, I don't think anyone does. But if he had won that game,
He at that point would have the same number of MVPs and Super Bowl wins as Drew Brees.
yeah, it's interesting to think about. No doubt about that.
You know, it's weird how the media can shape narratives like this. You know, obviously, I follow a lot of Green Bay Packers stuff, and I think one of the popular topics lately has been Drew Brees rising in people's rankings of all-time quarterbacks and Aaron Rodgers falling. And I saw somebody break it down. They talked about all the losing seasons that the Saints had, how they went 3-4 years in a row without making the playoffs and things like that. And they're like, it's weird how narratives can change so quickly because the media pushes one thing or the other, or prisoner of the moment type of stuff. And I like this topic. Where would Matt Ryan be on people's rankings if they had won that game? Which they didn't. And you can't pretend like they did, but, you know, could have been like that. They could have. Or where would the Seattle franchise, like that dynasty, back-to-back Super Bowl wins, where would they have been if, you know, they ran the ball?
I do think that Drew Brees is close to Aaron Rodgers. I think
Sure.
that Aaron Rodgers is the better all-time quarterback, but Drew Brees is also an all-time great, a top 10 quarterback of all time. So
I do think Sean Payton is a little overrated.
I really like him as a coach too.
No, I think he's a little overrated. I think people talk about like, oh, like I heard in the offseason, people talk about him like going to Dallas potentially and how, you know, if that were to happen, this would change the culture. I'm like, they've put up a lot of points in New Orleans, but they've lost a lot of playoff games they should have won.
Yeah, I do like Peyton, though. I'm saying, like, I think that he just gets it. Like, I think that players like playing for him, a la Mike Tomlin.
Sure. And they put up a lot of yards in New Orleans, but that's a team. What happened to them last year in the playoffs, if you don't mind me asking?
They lost.
And I'm pretty sure the two of us on this video, who called it?
You called it?
No, you did.
Okay, I don't even remember, but I figured it was you if you're asking me.
No, you are. You said I think they're going to lose to Minnesota.
It's interesting. So just that you brought up Aaron Rodgers, we'll take another little tangent because I brought up my dynasty league before.
I'm just having fun talking sports. So
yeah. I mean, if anyone's still watching, why wouldn't they want to hear about my dynasty league? So I'm sure you don't remember my team, but I drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, et cetera. I traded for Odell. Well, one of my buddies in the league had Mahomes. And I just really wanted Mahomes, man. Quarterbacks are important in this league. I think Aaron Rodgers is on his proverbial last legs, and I don't think that he has a big year coming because I think Green Bay is going to really become even more run acclimated. So I traded Aaron Rodgers, Odell, and TJ Hawkinson, who I actually really like for future purposes, for Mahomes and Jack Doyle, who I brought up earlier, and then a couple future rookie picks. And I think that was a deal like I had to make. What's your take on that?
You gave up Rodgers, Odell, and Hawkinson for Doyle, Mahomes, and some future picks?
Yes.
I mean, I love it for you because I'm with you. Like, I still think Aaron Rodgers could play. And I think if we surrounded him with any talent that wasn't named Devontae Adams, you would see the numbers be a little bit better. But I think Aaron Rodgers is just a guy for fantasy now because I'm with you. It's the A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones show.
Same. And I never like paying for quarterbacks. You know,
but Mahomes is a different breed.
And also in a dynasty league, like my quarterback position should be set for 10 years. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Barring injury, not should be, is.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
It is set. There is no way. Patrick Mahomes, and there was a guy that, you know, comes into a place I'm at a lot that we talk sports, and he's one of those people that, you know, is under that just believes that Tom Brady is the GOAT, no questions about it. How can you argue it? 6 rings, blah, blah, blah. I can get on board, and I understand that argument. What we then went into talking about after that was, like, how long and what would Patrick Mahomes have to be in, like, the next 2 years to think, like, this guy's already right up there? Because nobody that I can think of has gotten off to this start. Like, Brady won those Super Bowls early. But, like, when you watch football, yeah, Mahomes is it, right? Like, he is something special. He's a transcendent all-time talent.
He's like the Warriors, man. It doesn't matter, like, how much they're down. He is like the Warriors, in my
He's
opinion.
a human cheat code, right?
Yeah. If he wins another Super Bowl and or another MVP in the next 2 years, you already have to start talking about it, because a point that we talk about a lot, like, yeah, he hasn't done it yet in the future, but like, what reason would we think that he's not going to be, good going forward if he's
all right? So let's say the Chiefs go 11-5 this year and lose in the AFC Championship game or something like that, and Lamar Jackson wins MVP or Russell Wilson or whoever it might be. Then they come back next year, go 12-4, Mahomes wins the MVP, and they win another Super Bowl. At that point, already you have to be like, you can't say he's the greatest of all time because the resume is still short, but with everything you just said, how can you assume he's going to get worse?
He would definitely be on path to be the greatest of all time. You can't say he's the greatest of all time because he hasn't done it yet, but I guess, yeah, it's a good argument.
Right? Like, the only other guy I can think of in my lifetime from a football perspective that after 2 years I was like, yeah, he may be the greatest, is Randy Moss. Where you're like, this guy, I mean, the arguments for him being the greatest wide receiver of all time is just look at the tape, right?
For sure. Definitely. I see that, no doubt. I want to go back for a second because this is something I actually wanted to ask you about. I mentioned TJ Hawkinson in the deal that I traded for Mahomes. And I didn't want to deal him, but I certainly wasn't going to let him be a deal breaker for me for getting Patrick Mahomes. But I do like him more than Hooper this year. Going back to our original video, I think Hawkinson could have a big year. Hawinson's upside is much higher than Hooper's, in my opinion.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. Second-year tight end, probably more talented, and he also gets the Matt Stafford. And Matt Stafford, much in the mold of Matt Ryan, consistently plays with a bad defense where they end up having to throw the ball. They get into that comeback mold. He plays 8 games in a dome, 9 if you include Minnesota, plus any other one. So it's conducive to a passing attack. If you ask me which one of these guys has a better opportunity to catch 900 yards this year, I would answer Hawkinson, no questions about it.
I would so much rather take 2 tight ends like Hawkinson and Gesicki 4 rounds later than Hooper.
Oh, yeah. No question.
Money that one of those guys is better than Hooper for fantasy purposes.
Absolutely. I cannot get on board my projections for what the opportunity is for Hooper in Cleveland. There's just too many miles, and they want to run the ball first, and they got 2 really good running backs.
And like I said earlier in the video, he's good, but he doesn't move the needle for me.
No.
All these guys we're talking about are good. He's good, but he was in a very good situation with Matt Ryan. I think the Browns overpaid for him. It's good for him that David Njoku is asking for a trade and probably won't be there. But the Browns, like I mentioned earlier in the video, they drafted a tight end from Florida Atlantic that was a monster in college. I'm not going to be surprised in 2-3 years if he's the guy.
It's not impossible. It's not impossible in the slightest. So the more we talk about him, though, from a real-life football perspective, I'm starting to have more and more faith in the Browns being a lot better than last year. If I remember the last few games of the year, didn't they play a little bit more consistently?
Yeah, they finished 7-9, I believe, and they started off awful.
Right. I think it was a classic case of a young team getting too brash, too big for their britches. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Baker has a propensity for playing best when he's being doubted, right?
He does. But the flip side of that is, they should be better, and they could have a much better offseason and want it more. But that doesn't mean it's going to translate to wins, because the other teams want it too. You just look at their division. If Roethlisberger's healthy, you got Lamar Jackson we've talked about. If Burrow is good right away, then all of a sudden, like they always say, there's no freebies in the NFL.
So this is, to me, a great case of the expectations. And what I mean by that is the Steelers, even when they're crappy and they don't have the talent, find a way to win. The Browns, even when they have some talent, find a way to lose. So person for person, if you matched up these rosters, I don't think you could ever come out and be like, oh, clearly the Steelers are the better team, right? There's more talent on the Browns than the Steelers. But if I told you gun to head that you had to bet on one of these teams for surpassing the 500 record, who would you bet on?
Definitely the Steelers. And the same point you just made, kind of the flip side. If the Steelers had the Browns' talent, they'd be Super Bowl favorites.
Sure. But if I had to ask you, one of these teams goes 13-3, would you bet on the Steelers or the Browns?
The Browns, because the Steelers just don't have the talent for that.
Yeah, they just don't. They're not I mean, we like Juju, but he is not a needle mover like a Randy Moss or anything like that. This is not a difference-making wide receiver one that you have to game plan around week in and week out. He's good. Roethlisberger's obviously seen better days. You know, they have a stable of running backs, but none of them are Le'Veon Bell in his prime or anything like that. The defense is solid, but it's difficult for me to like picture them as being right there at the end of it in the AFC.
Yeah, I can't see that. They're
Like if they somehow got there and played the Chiefs, you'd feel like they would just get cooked.
Yeah, like they're good, but they've certainly lost a lot, and they never got it done really when they, with this new team, even with Le'Veon and Antonio Brown, they never got it done, and they were really good then.
Yeah, I mean, what are we now? Almost 20 years removed from them winning the Super Bowl last time.
Wow, really?
No, the Arizona one. I forgot about it. I'm thinking way back to the Seattle game. So the Arizona Super Bowl is like 12 years ago.
Okay.
Ish, 11 and a half, I think, at this point.
Okay.
So it's been a little while. I mean, that's a good portion of the Roethlisberger regime, especially the part where he was more talented and played better, too.
Yeah, and just speaking of quarterbacks, another guy, and we'll get there, we got to do a video on, and I'm saying it as Cam Newton, who we haven't even talked about.
I mean, is he even going to be the starter?
I think that he'll either be the starter or he won't be on the team. And we'll see, like, in training camp, whether it works.
Okay. I mean, they're not paying him anything, so.
No. But he's also, like, probably much better than Jarrett Stidham.
I would think so, right? I mean, this is a number one overall pick, a former MVP, went to a Super Bowl. It's been a rough ride of it the last few years, though. So I know Belichick loves Stidham. It doesn't mean that he's talented or he's good enough. I could see Belichick being stubborn enough that he wants to make it happen with Stidham, and Cam was just a project. So we'll see. I'm interested to watch this one. It definitely made the idea of New England more exciting because I can't argue your point that Cam Newton's more talented than Jarrett Stidham.
Well, I could definitely see what you're saying. If it's like close, Stidham winning out, Belichick loves him. But I could definitely see it like not being close if Cam Newton's healthy and is Cam Newton. I mean,
exactly.
We don't know, but like you just mentioned, all the stuff that he has that most quarterbacks don't have. Number one pick, MVP, et cetera, et cetera.
And I don't know how much if you ever listen to like Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp talk. So they've been going on and off about this, and I've had them on in the background occasionally from time to time. And, Skip's always hounding on, well, the Patriots' weapons and wide receivers are the worst in the league. At least they were last year, especially after Edelman got banged up, ranked last by Pro Football Focus in separation and things like that. But Cam doesn't need that the same way than Brady does, right? Like Cam gets it done a different way. He never lit it up to the wide receivers. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, like, how many wide receivers do you think have had 1,000-yard seasons under Cam Newton? I bet you it's a small number, maybe like a Steve Smith year or something like that, and that's about it.
Maybe like maybe that's it. So I agree with you, but I also think that could be the downfall of Cam Newton here also.
Sure.
Is that we saw it in Carolina. They didn't have the weapons anymore, and he struggled to continue to just make plays by himself because he got hurt. He had his trouble staying healthy, and New England's weapons are not good.
No, they're not.
But I will say a point that you've made a lot about Brady. Like, if Belichick can put Cam Newton in a situation to succeed, I think Cam Newton will succeed. So I'm really interested to see that match,
Right. I mean, he's going to be motivated. He's got to be motivated this year, having not played in so long. This is such a make it or break it type of situation for him. I'm not like a monster Cam fan or anything like that, but this would be the one year I wouldn't hate seeing the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
So I'm not a monster Cam fan either, but I always like rooting for a guy that seems to like get shit on by his former team. I don't know if Carolina like did him dirty, but it kind of seems that way. This guy took you to the Super Bowl. He's the best player in Carolina history. And then all of a sudden he's just on the street. I think they did him dirty.
Okay. There was a vote on Twitter from the Carolina Panthers franchise, who was the best player in Carolina history, and they could only do 3 votes. They did not include him in it. It was Kuechly, Peppers, and Steve Smith. And
it's definitely Cam Newton, in my opinion. All those guys are good, but it's definitely Cam Newton, in my opinion.
Okay, Julius Peppers was better at his position in his prime than Cam was at his, I think. Okay. But overall, if this is just who would you rather have on your team to make a difference, the quarterback position is just so much more impactful.
So Peppers is one of the best defensive ends of all time. I agree with you. He's better than Cam at his position, but it's not by like so much, in my opinion.
Sure, and Luke Kuechly is probably a better linebacker than Cam was quarterback.
Maybe, but I don't think it's by that far margin either. Because again, Cam Newton, MVP. If he, again, kind of like Matt Ryan, if he had won that Super Bowl.
Sure. The difference for me though is like, and maybe I don't view this one the right way. Cam's best season was amazing. His other seasons, I wasn't overly impressed by him. His peak and his pinnacle was one of the best seasons I've ever seen a quarterback play. But a lot of the seasons surrounding that, like, yeah, he had fantasy numbers, but I was never being like, it was more Michael Vick than it was, and in his great year, he was more Patrick Mahomes.
For sure. I'm with you there.
So, all right. Anything else you want to throw in? Obviously, we got a little off topic, but we haven't talked sports in a hot minute, so I think we were a little bored.
That's all I got.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching. We'll try to get back out here a little bit more often.
Thanks, guys.